60. Anyone can prove the sea horizon perfectly straight and the earth perfectly flat using nothing more than a level, tripods, and a wooden plank. At any altitude above sea level, simply fix a 6 to 12 foot long smooth leveled board edgewise upon tripods and observe the skyline from eye level behind it. The distant horizon will always appear perfectly level with the upper edge of the board. Furthermore, if you move in a half circle from one end of the board to the other, whilst observing the skyline over the upper edge, you will be able to trace a clear, flat 10 to 20 miles depending on your altitude. This would be impossible if the Earth were a globe 25,000 miles in circumference. The horizon would align over the center of the board, but then gradually, noticeably decline towards the extremities. Just 10 miles on each side would necessitate an easily visible curvature of 66.6 feet from each end to the center. 61. If the Earth were actually a big ball 25,000 miles in circumference, the horizon would be noticeably curved even at sea level, and everything on or approaching the horizon would appear to tilt backwards slightly from your perspective. Distant buildings along the horizon would all look like leaning towers of Pisa falling away from the observer. A hot air balloon taking off, then drifting steadily away from you on a ball Earth would slowly and constantly appear to lean back more and more the farther away it flew, the bottom of the basket coming gradually into view as the top of the balloon disappears from sight. In reality, however, buildings, balloons, trees, people, anything and everything at right angles to the ground and horizon remain so regardless the distance or height of the observer. 62. Samuel Rowbotham's experiments at the Old Bedford level proved conclusively the canal's water to be completely flat over a 6-mile stretch. First, he stood in the canal with his telescope held 8 inches above the surface of the water. Then his friend in a boat with a 5-foot-tall flag sailed the 6 miles away. If Earth were a ball 25,000 miles in circumference, the 6-mile stretch of water should have comprised an arc exactly 6 feet high in the middle, so the entire boat and flag should have ultimately disappeared, when in fact the entire boat and flag remained visible at the same height for the entire journey. 63. In a second experiment, Dr. Rowbotham affixed flags 5 feet high along the shoreline, one at every mile marker, then using his telescope mounted at 5 feet just behind the first flag looked over the tops of all 6 flags, which lined up in a perfectly straight line. If the Earth were a ball 25,000 miles in circumference, the flags should have progressively dipped down after the first establishing line of sight, the second would have descended 8 inches, 32 inches for the third, 6 feet for the fourth, 10 feet 8 inches for the fifth, and 16 feet 8 inches for the sixth. 64. Quoting Earth Not a Globe by Samuel Rowbotham, "It is known that the horizon at sea, whatever distance it may extend to the right and left of the observer on land, always appears as a straight line. The following experiment has been tried in various parts of the country. At Brighton, on a rising ground near the race course, 2 poles were affixed in the earth 6 yards apart and directly opposite the sea. Between these poles a line was tightly stretched parallel to the horizon. From the center of the line the view embraced not less than 20 miles on each side, making a distance of 40 miles. A vessel was observed sailing directly westwards. The line cut the rigging a little above the bulwarks, which it did for several hours or until the vessel had sailed the whole distance of 40 miles. The ship coming into view from the east would have to ascend an inclined plane for 20 miles until it arrived at the center of the arc, whence it would have to descend for the same distance. The square of 20 miles multiplied by 8 inches gives 266 feet as the amount the vessel would be below the line at the beginning and at the end of the 40 miles. 65. Also quoting Dr. Rowbotham, "On a shore near Waterloo, a few miles to the north of Liverpool, a good telescope was fixed at an elevation of 6 feet above the water. It was directed to a large steamer just leaving the River Mersey and sailing out to Dublin. Gradually the masthead of the receding vessel came nearer to the horizon, until at length, after more than 4 hours had elapsed, it disappeared. The ordinary rate of sailing of the Dublin steamers was fully 8 miles an hour, so that the vessel would be at least 32 miles distant when the masthead came to the horizon. The 6 feet of elevation of the telescope would require 3 miles to be deducted for convexity, which would leave 29 miles, the square of which multiplied by 8 inches gives 560 feet. deducting 80 feet for the height of the main mast, and we find that, according to the doctrine of rotundity, the masthead of the outward-bound steamer should have been 480 feet below the horizon. Many other experiments of this kind have been made upon sea-going steamers, and always with results entirely incompatible with the theory that the Earth is a globe. 66. Dr. Rowbotham conducted several other experiments using telescopes, spirit levels, sextants, and theodolites, special precision instruments used for measuring angles in horizontal or vertical planes. By positioning them at equal heights, aimed at each other successively, he proved over and over the Earth to be perfectly flat for miles without a single inch of curvature. His findings caused quite a stir in the scientific community, and thanks to 30 years of his efforts, the shape of the Earth became a hot topic of debate around the turn of the 19th century. 67. The distance across the Irish Sea from the Isle of Man's Douglas Harbour to Great Orme's Head in North Wales is 60 miles. If the Earth was a globe, then the surface of the water between them would form a 60-mile arc, the center towering 1,944 feet higher than the coastlines at either end. It is well known and easily verifiable, however, that on a clear day from a modest altitude of 100 feet, the Great Orme's Head is visible from Douglas Harbour. This would be completely impossible on a globe of 25,000 miles. Assuming the 100-foot altitude causes the horizon to appear approximately 13 miles off, the 47 miles remaining means the Welsh coastline should still fall an impossible 1,472 feet below the line of sight. 68. The Philadelphia skyline is clearly visible from Apple Pie Hill in the New Jersey Pine Barrens 40 miles away. If Earth were a ball 25,000 miles in circumference, factoring in the 205-foot elevation of Apple Pie Hill, the Philly skyline should remain well hidden beyond 335 feet of curvature. 69. The New York City skyline is clearly visible from Harriman State Park's Bear Mountain 60 miles away. If Earth were a ball 25,000 miles in circumference, viewing from Bear Mountain's 1,283-foot summit, the Pythagorean theorem determining distance to the horizon being 1.23 times the square root of the height in feet, the New York City skyline should be invisible behind 170 feet of curved Earth.